Merry meet, Annie here. Welcome to Monday on Pagan Perspective. Our topic this week came to us from I'll Wake Up Alone, and that person asked us, how did you come out of the broom closet? Specifically, to family members of the Abrahamic religions and friends. Is it possible to balance your personal path and the relationships you have developed with those who disagree with it? In a way, I had quite an advantage, I'll wake up alone, in that when I was coming up in the craft, we didn't mention it to anybody. So none of our friends who weren't of our circle, and none of our family members, no matter how close we were to them, knew about our private practice. Some of us were able to have conversations with them that we were not Christian, for instance, that we were exploring other paths. Some of us were able to have good conversations along those lines, and some of us were not. In my case, I chose as a youngster, truly as a teenager, to think that my spiritual path was a personal one. I didn't feel the need to share it with others who weren't of like mind or that I didn't know would be accepting of it. And indeed that did include family members who I knew would not understand. Now, I came up in the late 60s and early 70s when I first started on the path, and what my family knew of my differences, and they knew only a part of the way in which I was different from them, was they basically wrote me off to be part of the flower child generation. That anything I said or did was, oh, there she is being a hippie again. And yes, that was said in a derogative sense. I just didn't go into it from there. I let them be there with that. And I do remember that as I aged and I matured and stayed true to my path, and that did not mean that my family and even my friends who didn't know my path knew of my path, but they did see the way I lived, the respectful way I lived, the kind way I lived, the way I worked and volunteered and was the first there to help when someone needed help, the first one to offer prayer when someone in the family or in our circle of friends needed that kind of support. In other words, over time, and I wish I could say it was just a year or two, but it was many years, those who are in my life who are not of this path and would not understand or accept the path did come to accept that I was a very spiritual being. I still remember when my grandmother, who didn't know what my spiritual path was, told me that I was, of all the members of our family, the most spiritual, and the one she felt was the closest child to God. She could not have understood the differences in our faiths, in the religions that we practiced, but her comment that day, which has lived with me all these years, she's been gone a very long time, had to do with the way I live my life. The advantage I had was when I was coming up, we did not tell anyone, no one. Even if it was someone we trusted, you simply didn't speak of the way outside of our circles and our intimate brothers and sisters in those circles. So I didn't have a debate as a young person who I told what to. There are still people in my life now who do know my practices now, who knew me then, who knew nothing of them. And in a way, for me, the benefit was, when the time came, we started being more open about this and deciding the ways in which we would be open, how much we wanted to share, and with who. I was probably 30 or so by then. And I had a maturity of knowing what's my business is my business, and knowing I will pick and decide who I will share what with. To this very day, I feel strongly that we decide that. It is not decided for us. Some people know who I am, they know how I practice, they know what my role is in the pagan community. Some people do not. Everyone that I know knows that I am not a Christian. And when I get the question, usually from a place of respect, sometimes not. How could I not be a Christian? I'm an American. I appear to be your typical Christian type from a Christian family. I just say that early on in my life I explored many, many spiritual paths, and many of them spoke to me. And that I follow my instincts in the conversations I have with deity, who is sometimes God and sometimes goddess. And that is usually as far as those conversations go. I do not have conversations beyond that unless someone has questions which feel comfortable and respectful to me, because I just don't feel the need to... Well, I had somebody once who said to me, no one knows what goes on between the four walls of your home. No one knows what goes on behind the doors of your bedroom. No one knows the things which they are not meant to know. Truly, our deep spiritual yearnings, the way in which we satisfy our spiritual urges, to me I find as intimate as any other intimate act of our lives. So I believe that in situations where one is comfortable, one speaks of them, and where one believes it should be held private, it's held private. I've never had a problem blending in and being part of my Christian family or my Christian friends. I find deep meaning in their rituals. I know them and understand them. And I find that I can be in the presence of those rituals and my deities speak to me in the energy and in the love raised up through those rituals, which may not be the rituals I have practiced since I was a very young child, but I can connect to them at a level of community and the energy of shared community and the beauty of that. So nothing about my paganism has ever made me uncomfortable celebrating with Christian family and friends. Now, at this point in my life, a great majority of the people who know me know who I am at a spiritual level. Some still do not. Some simply don't need to. Some I would not be comfortable having that discussion with them. For instance, my parents are extremely elderly now. We're talking people in their 80s. And they have enough problem with the fact that I'm a Unitarian Universalist, because even that to them is the throwback to the days they thought I was their hippie child and they just shook their heads and were concerned for my welfare. So even me, almost 60, they can look at as that hippie child, and they have enough problem dealing with Unitarian Universalism and its free-spirited religion. I have no reason to bring my pagan faith to them, simply because there would not be understanding there, both at the spiritual and the intellectual level, and there is no purpose at this point in my life to cause any disruption or schism in my relationship with loved ones. And yes, we could say if someone loves us, they accept everything about us. But if we feel that means we share everything with everyone that we care about, well, then we have to accept the consequences. We have to know what the give and take of that kind of honesty is. I believe that we have a right to be as private as we want to about everything in our lives, and we decide who we will tell what to. I do believe that we do need to, within that, find the way that it doesn't keep us separate from our loved ones. To say, I cannot go to this church service with you or celebrate this religious festival with you because I'm pagan and I don't believe that, well, that's the kind of thing I have never done. I've never felt it benefited me to separate myself or distance myself from the religion of my family and of most of my friends who are not pagan. It's a very personal decision. And what I've shared with you is simply what I have chosen to do through my life. And I also am very appreciative of the fact that when I was a youngster and finding my way to this path, it was required by our elders that it be kept private and to ourselves and not shared with family and friends outside our pagan circle. So I didn't, as a young person, even have the choice, if you look at it that way, of being very open about who I was. I grew up spiritually within the safe environment of my pagan brothers and sisters and didn't ever have to worry about being challenged or denigrated by those outside the path because we simply didn't deal with them. We kept ourselves, as our teachings were, the hidden children of the goddess. I'm not saying that's the best thing. I'm just explaining that Early on, I developed the habit of holding close to myself in private what I chose to. So therefore, later in life, as I started being more open about who I am, and I consider myself to be very open now, I still hold the power of this I will keep to myself in this situation. So don't really have advice in the here's what you should do, just sharing with you what I chose to do throughout my life. And also I think we'll all have this same thought when we share this. It's a personal decision. We each come to some place that is right for us when we deal with these things. I do believe if you're dealing with family members who are Christian, friends who are Christian, that you need to think about the acts that you may do as a pagan that may distance yourself from them even if you're unaware of that. Things like pulling back from celebrations and religious festivals and even family gatherings that are religious. And do you really want to create that distancing with your family? There's my take on it, which is nothing more than how I have chosen to deal with it. And I'm very interested, of course, to hear how all of our hosts and also from comments that our viewers will make how you have chosen to deal with this. Especially interesting to me because so many of you are coming up as youngsters in the path at a time at which you are being more outward, more open, more public about who you are and what you do. And I am very curious to know how you would handle that with family. If I had handled that openly with family when I was young, it would have been the end of my family relationships. Therefore, I'm very sensitive to the fact that this is a very serious question that our viewer has given us, and I'm very curious to know how others have chosen to handle this in this time, as opposed to how I chose to handle it when I was in my teens and early 20s, when the decision was actually taken away from me because we were not permitted to speak of ourselves outside our circles. I wish you all mirth and reverence. Mary Part,